Amen.
All right. I am still a little congested as I was last week. I think I'm getting better. I hope I'm getting better. But it's good to be with all of y'all this morning. We've been in South Carolina all week, and we got back, well, really late. Well, it wasn't really late, but much later than it would have been had I been traveling on my own. But we've been back since Friday. Like I said, I'm glad to be here. I think Mother's here. Daddy is not feeling well this morning. It's an unrelated sickness. It's not cold symptoms or anything like that, but he's not feeling well today. Otherwise, he would be here. But it's good to be here with all of y'all. I'm glad to be back, and I guess I will be leaving town tomorrow to head back to work, and I'll be starting back on Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's good to be here with y'all. For the lesson this morning, I decided to do something. Well, this isn't really a New Year's themed lesson, but I think it's something that we can carry with us into the new year. It's really an attitude type lesson. To kind of set the stage for this lesson, I'll tell you all this. I may have said this before. I don't think I have here actually. When I was in college, I developed a nickname from several of my friends, and the more I've been around people, the same people have given me the same nickname at times, and people who haven't been around the others who have called me this, but a bunch of people have called me this in the past. I developed the nickname of Eeyore. Do y'all think that fits me any? So by nature, I'm not always a very exuberant type person. I'm not going to say I'm miserable all the time, but I'm also not necessarily a happy-go-lucky type person. I have a personality that many people would describe as the pessimist, so to speak, and sometimes Alan, he's nodding real heavily, but for those of you who've been around me a lot, know that sometimes I am a glass half empty kind of person. But a lot of people called me that throughout college, and of course, to be honest, I guess, and sometimes it's been fitting, or it's been fitting to be called that, but sometimes I am a little down and out, and I set up this lesson by telling you this because my lesson today is on staying positive. and I tell you the story just to set the stage by saying I am not always a very positive person. I like to think sometimes, I like to say it's a realist, that I'm a realist, but I guess sometimes it comes across as I'm a negative person at times. But I think it's important for us to, especially as we're coming to this time of the year that people like to consider an opportunity to start new, to begin fresh. I think it's important to go forward having a good attitude, understanding what it is we can do to make our lives better in this new year. So the title of this lesson for Bible class is Staying as Positive as Possible. Now, I think it's important to clarify the last little bit. Quite honestly, sometimes it's very difficult for us to stay positive. But let me ask this question. Is it possible for everybody to be positive? Is that possible for every person to be a positive person? It's possible. It's not that probable, is it? We all know someone who's always going to be looking for the negative no matter how good things are going. Daddy tells a story about his grandmother, and I never met her. But he said she used to be terrified of the weather, and she would always complain about the weather and how terrible it was. And he says on one occasion it was a really beautiful day and nothing was wrong with it. And he went up to her and said, "Mama, look how pretty the day is today." And she was like, "Oh yes, it's a pretty day, but just imagine what it's going to be like tomorrow." So, that's kind of the attitude that sometimes people have. And we all know people who do not, who just simply are not positive. And I think for us, as we're looking forward, as we're trying to live good, happy lives moving forward, it's important for us to know as Christians we can be happy. We can have a positive life. And the truth is, things have happened this past year that has taken away that positivity from our lives. Undoubtedly, things will happen in this next year that will take away from that positivity. But this positive attitude is a mindset. It's being able to remain positive regardless of the things that are happening in our lives. We're not going to be positive all the time. That's just how it is. But I think there are three challenges that we face as Christians, three things we need to keep in mind as we're heading toward this new year to help us stay positive. Number one, we need to fill our minds with good things. Now, the power of the mind, we all know the mind is a very powerful thing, but this is actually addressed in the scriptures as well, this power that the mind can have. Colossians 3 verse 2 says, "Set your mind on things above, not on things that are on earth." Now I think for us as people, that's, something that can be really challenging because all we know are things of this earth. We need to be looking ahead. But we need to understand that some of the things that we put too much faith in, too much stock in here on earth is going to one day mean absolutely nothing. Jesus said, "What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits his own soul?" And he doesn't give an answer to that question. It's what we would call a rhetorical question, one to make the people he's talking to think. But the answer is this: the answer is absolutely nothing. It does not profit a person anything. Jesus said, "Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven," because the things in this world are going to rust. Things in this world are not going to be there. They're going to be destroyed at some point or another. And we need to understand that we are not to put faith in physical things of this earth. We need to set our minds on things above. Philippians 4 verse 8 says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." These are things we need as Christians to meditate upon. So let's break this verse down and focus on the list of things that Paul gives us here. First of all, he says, whatever is true. Now, I think in general, we as people, we really appreciate truth. None of us in here like to be lied to. All of us in here have been lied to at one point or another, and most of us in here are probably good at discerning when someone is telling us the truth or when they're not. As a teacher, I get a lot of lies from students, and there's quite a few past teachers in this room right now, and y'all probably been lied to many times by students. And you kind of know when they're lying to you. You kind of get it. I get most of my lies around the time that the big essays are due. That's when students will contact me. You would be shocked how many power outages happen on nights essays are due. That's just how it is. But of course, I have in my syllabus that even if the internet goes out, even if the power goes out, you're still responsible to turn all this in. And I'll get emails, please, 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 can I turn the paper in? I'll be, sure, you can turn it in. There'll be a late penalty. But we appreciate truth. But the truth we need to be seeking is the truth that Jesus offers to us. Turn over to John chapter 8. Verse 31 says, so Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Jesus' words are truth. And that's what we need to be following. Not only are Jesus' words truth, but it's following Jesus' words that will put us in the right direction. Flip over a few chapters to John chapter 14. And in the context here, Jesus is talking to his disciples in an attempt to comfort them, because they have come to this realization that he's going to be leaving them soon. They understand, or he's told them, he's told them he's going to be leaving. They're upset, and he tells them, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I'm going." Now, Jesus has asked a question here, followed up. And it's Thomas who asked this question. And sometimes I think Thomas gets a bad reputation as an apostle, as a disciple. But I think it's important for us to remember that all of the disciples failed Jesus the night he was taken to be crucified. All of the disciples failed Jesus in some manner or another, but we really get the focus of two disciples who failed Jesus. We get Peter, who denied him. We get an insight to that. And we get Thomas, who didn't believe he was back. Okay? But I think it's important for us to know that just because his story was highlighted in the text, he wasn't the only person to question Jesus or fall away from Jesus. All of the disciples did, and Jesus, in fact, told them they were going to. But he asked this question. Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" And Jesus said to him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes through the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." So the way to get to this life, Jesus is that way. Jesus is truth that we have. And we need to remember that. So whatever is true, we need to focus. We need to meditate on things that are true. We need to pay close attention to God's words that we're given, because this is the truth that we have. Now, unfortunately, sometimes people tend to skew the truth that we have. Sometimes people will tell us things that are actually not in the Scriptures, or things that we find to not be true. And that's why it's very important for us to search the Scriptures. The next portion says, whatever is honorable, or some versions say, whatever is noble. And I think this concept of searching, examining the Scriptures kind of goes into this idea. Turn over to Acts chapter 17. We're going to see this word noble being used, and we see it really describing a group of people. And when we think of the word noble, we probably think of things such as nobility, right? Princes, princesses, kings, queens, whatever. People who are nobility in their countries or whatever. I know in America it's a little different. We don't have those things, but especially in Europe, nobility is something that is prized to those people. But notice why this group of people is described as noble. Verse 11, and this is in Berea, where Paul and Silas were. It says, now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. Now, just to set the context, the Jews in Thessalonica they had to sneak out of town because they were trying to kill them. So certainly wouldn't describe that as noble, but here's why they were noble. It said, they received the word with all eagerness, examining the Scriptures daily to see if these things were so. That's where our nobility needs to come in when it comes to examining the truth of Jesus' words. It's not just about simply accepting things that people tell us. I've never been one to take what anybody says and accept it as truth. I like to search things for myself. I've always been that way. If someone tells me something, I'm not going to believe it just because someone said it. Now, all of us have people in our lives who I think we're much more apt to listen to something they say more than others. We all know that one person who, if they tell us something, we know it's probably not true, right? But I think us as Christians, learners, whatever, we need to make sure that we don't just simply accept what people tell us. If someone, tells me a fact, chances are I'm going to look into that fact and see if it's true or not. That's how we need to be. We need to meditate upon things that are true, things that are noble, things that are just. And when I think about just, we think about justice, right? Things that are fair, things that are just. And turn over to Revelation chapter 16. I think the thing we need to remember about this word is we serve a God that is just. And we need to be thankful for that. But Revelation chapter 16, verse 7, it says, I heard the altar saying, yes, Lord, God the Almighty, true and just are your judgments. And I think for us as Christians, we need to be thankful that we serve a just God. Now, justice goes a couple of different ways. God is going to make sure he does what is fair, but we also serve a God who gives mercy as well. And I think for us as Christians, that's the most important thing, because if God was just with each and every one of us in that giving us what we deserve, then we wouldn't get very far. But still, it's a quality we need to have. We need to be fair with people. We need to be just with others. The next one that we see in that verse is whatever is pure. And this again is another quality that we as Christians need to have. We need to be pure. We need to stay away from sin. Jesus, he said in his Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, he said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Why do we need to be pure? We need to make sure we're able to see God. And by living the pure life, that's going to set us up on the right track to be able to do that. Whatever is lovely. Love is the most important thing that we as Christians can have. Paul said it, 1 Corinthians 13. He focuses on, there are a lot of things, he said there are a lot of things that are great, faith, hope, but the greatest is love. That's what we need to carry with us as Christians. We need to show others our love. Whatever things are true, noble, just, pure, lovely. And then the last one, commendable, or some versions say of good report. Now, I think sometimes as Christians, we forget that we need, well, let me rephrase that. I think sometimes as Christians, we need to focus more on the fact that we need to have a positive influence on others. We need people to look at us and think well of us, whether they are a Christian or not. In Luke chapter 2, near the end of that chapter, we're told the story of Jesus when he was 12 years old, and at the very end of that chapter, we're told that when he went home with his parents, he was submissive, he grew in stature, he grew in wisdom. He grew up physically, he grew wiser as he grew up, and he grew in favor with God, which is important. But the one that I think sometimes we skirt over a little bit, he grew in favor with men. And this is Luke chapter 2, verse 52. We need to have a good favor with mankind, with the people who are not Christians. How do you think we're ever going to get people to follow Jesus if they look at us and see us as people who are who don't have a good report with others? And in fact, I know Christians who, quite honestly, a lot of people don't like them. And I think we need to be conscious of that. We need to understand that we need to have that people need to look at us favorably, whether they are a Christian or whether they're not. Because Jesus had a lot of people who he grew in favor with men. They looked at him in a favorable way. So these are some things we need to meditate on and can help us stay positive, I think, if we focus on things that are true, noble, just, and pure, and lovely, and of good report. And then the passage ends, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Now, it says anything praiseworthy. Notice that all these characteristics are characteristics that are positive. These are things that we need to carry with us, and they're positive things. And this is a good verse, I think, for us to think about and to focus on as we're moving forward into this new year. These are characteristics that can help us be positive, that can allow others to view us in a positive way, and to not have people look at you and say that you're negative or Eeyore or whatever, which I'm very much guilty of. So we do need to be positive. I think another thing that we need to think about as we're filling our minds with good things, part of that is knowing what not to fill our minds with. Turn over to Matthew chapter 7. And I'm going to say, in my opinion, this is probably one of the most misunderstood groupings of verses in the Bible. There are a lot of people who have never picked up a Bible in their life, but they can say that the Bible says, Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, in the context of, you can't judge me, because Jesus said not to. That being said, this is very misunderstood in that, in fact, as Christians, we are instructed to judge certain things. You know, I think us as Christians, our biggest points of judgment that we have to make is, quite honestly, there are some people that we don't need to be around. There are some places we don't need to go. And I think especially as younger people, we probably struggle with that a little bit more than when we're older. And, you know, especially the teenage group of people, this is something that they're most of the time going to have to learn and figure out for themselves the hard way. And we've all kind of been there, I think. But if we're going to do what is right, it is not breaking Jesus' law to say, no, I'm not going there because I know what these people are going to be doing. In fact, that's following Jesus' law. What Jesus is talking about here is hypocrisy. Jesus is talking about the people who are just as bad as the people they are condemning. And it's not our place to condemn anyone, but it is our place to decide whether we need to be around certain people. There are people that I cut out of my life just because I had to. And I'm sure everyone in here has cut someone out of your life because of what they did, what they stood for, or maybe what they stood against. I don't know. But I think for us as Christians, we have to judge in some way. We have to make good judgments. We have to look at people and take ourselves out of certain situations. Oh, I'm not. You know what? These people here, they're having this party. They're getting drunk. They're breaking in and stealing things in this building. I can't judge them, so I'm going to go along. No, that's dumb. But that's what society is teaching us to do. That's the problem. I think one of the many problems we have that our society is pushing us toward. Just leave me alone and let me do my own thing. Sometimes these things that people want to be left alone and doing, they're breaking God's law and they're doing terrible things. 1 Corinthians 15:33, I think, is a really big tell as to something we need to keep in mind in this concept of should we judge people. Paul says, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. Now, I'll tell y'all this story. When I was in high school, one thing I don't think I'll ever forget, our senior class had done something that made teachers mad, and the headmaster called us all together in the library one day and gave us a speech about how we need to make sure we choose our friends carefully. And I'm not going to say it the exact way he did, but the concept he told us, he said, I didn't used to think this, but you become like the people you hang around. If you hang around good people, that's good. If you hang around bad people, that's bad. And kind of the analogy he used is you can't go walking around in a sewer and expect to come out smelling like a rose. That just doesn't happen. And this isn't just applicable for the young people. This is for everybody. Everybody can fall into this trap. That's why we have to judge sometimes who we need to be around. And it's like I said, it's not breaking God's law to decide I'm not going to be around this person because I know what they're going to be doing. In fact, I think for us, it's important for us to have those judgments. So, the big problem, I think, that comes from this concept of sometimes we have to judge people is that some people, quite honestly, just love to point out the flaws in other people's lives. It's easy to say what's wrong with this person, but sometimes we avoid ourselves in the process. That's the problem Jesus is talking about. We need to understand that people who are sinners, they've got the same problem that we do. We're all sinners. They may sin differently than we do, but we need to understand that with these people, we don't need to look down on our noses at people. We do need to try to help people. Again, we do need to avoid some things that we know we don't need to do. So when we make judgments about people, we need to make sure we have the proper attitude. And I think the proper attitudes we have come down to, number one, recognition. We need to realize there are some people we can't be around. Number two, concern, which is realizing that person is a sinner who needs God. We need to have concern for these people. Number three, understanding, realizing that we have been in these people's shoes and not fall into that trap of hypocrisy. And then finally, it just comes down to love. We need to be sincere with these people. Unfortunately, most people who like to point out problems in other people's lives do it with an I told you so attitude. That's not what we need to have. We need to have concern for these people. We need to be loving to these people. And we need to understand that Jesus died for them just like he did us. And we need to move forward with that. So that was point number one, and I'm almost out of time. So I didn't intend on doing that. I apologize. Maybe I'll have to stretch this one out a little later. Let's see how far I can get. Number two, well, let me recap number one. Fill our minds with good things, okay? That's one way we can stay positive. Number two, not only fill our minds with good things, but we need to fill our lives with good things. Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to make sure we fill our lives with good things? Well, that's because people are looking at us. Turn over to Matthew chapter 5. And I'll say, for us as Christians, people are looking at us in a couple of different ways, okay? We live in a society where people are looking at us through a microscope, hoping we do something wrong, hoping they can point out our flaws and make an example out of us and tear down what it is we stand for. That's what a lot of people in society are doing. They're looking at us. They're scrutinizing us, hoping we make mistakes. And then on the other side, I would say Christians are looking at us as an example. We need to be a good example to people. And really here in Matthew chapter 16, this is what Jesus is saying. Let's begin with verse 14 actually. He says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works, and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. People are looking at us as an example. I'm getting ready to teach literature this semester, which I usually mostly teach in the spring. And in our American Lit class, it kind of starts with the beginning. It starts with Native American literature and then moves on through the different ages. One of the periods we teach about is the period when the Pilgrims are coming to America. We teach that type of literature in our American history, and one of the things we talk about and we teach as literature is a speech that John Winthrop gave in 1630 to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And he actually cites this scripture and it's really a sermon. I consider it half sermon, half pep talk to the people getting off the boat or who are on the boat about to get off. He's telling these people, he said, we are going to be a light to the world. We're the first people, we're the people that everyone's going to be looking at. So we need to be positive. We need to have a positive impact. He says we need to be like a city up on a hill. People are going to be looking at them with scrutiny. Maybe people will be looking to them as an example. And that's what I think we need to think about as Christians today. People are looking at us as an example, but also with scrutiny. And that's why it's so important that we fill our lives with good things, because people are going to be looking at us. Titus chapter 2 verse 7 says, show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us. We don't need to give people an opportunity to say bad things about us. We have to be a good example. And sometimes that means putting away how we used to be. And us as Christians, we all come from, I know there's different people in this room that come from various paths, various, walks of life and whatnot. But all of us have had to put away things to be who we are today, to be Christians. And Paul says in Ephesians 4, beginning with verse 22, he says, put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. If we fill our lives with good things, then we're going to have a positive influence on people around us. And I think that's what we need to remember moving forward. We need to have this positive influence. We need to be positive ourselves. And like I said, you're getting this from a guy who's already admitted he's not positive all the time. It's something I've got to work on. And then the last thing, we need to fill our lives with good things, fill our minds with good things, fill our lives with good things. And the last thing, we need to look for the good in everyone and everybody and everything. Now, this is one of those things that I think is easier said than done sometimes. But we need to understand that God is willing to look for the good in us. I think one of the best examples we have is of Paul. He was someone who was thankful that God just didn't see someone who was devoted to persecuting Christians, which he was. And he willingly admitted that. In fact, in Acts chapter 22, verse 4, he said, I persecuted this way to the death. He wanted to see those people killed. But God looked at Paul and saw someone who could be a great benefit to his kingdom. Regardless of our past, regardless of things we have done, we need to be thankful that God can look at us today as someone who can be beneficial to him. And if God's willing to do that with us, we need to be willing to do that with other people. So, we need to look for the good in other people, regardless of, where they come from, how they look, how they act, because God is willing to do that for us. So I hope these things have been helpful this morning. And I think, like I said, we have a good challenge as we begin this new year to stay positive, regardless of, maybe what we're leaving behind in 2022. And we have a good opportunity to change our minds, change our attitudes, and try to be better people in this upcoming year. Thank y'all.